My brother's grand opening was supposed to be the happiest night of his life. I got 31 missed calls before sunrise and learned it was the worst night of mine. But let me back up. It was a Thursday in late October, and I was sitting cross-legged on my couch in my apartment in Phoenix, eating leftover Thai food and half watching a documentary about coral reefs. My phone kept buzzing with Instagram notifications, my brother posting story after story from Las Vegas, where he'd been for the past 4 days setting up his new restaurant. I scrolled through them the way you scroll through a stranger's vacation photos. Detached. A little tired. There was the gleaming open kitchen with the copper pendant lights. There was the bar lined with backlit bottles that probably cost more than my monthly rent. There was my mother, beaming in a red dress I'd never seen before, holding a champagne flute and looking like she'd already forgotten I existed. I hadn't been invited to the grand opening. My brother told me the venue had a strict capacity limit. He said it with the kind of casual cruelty that only family can pull off, slipping it into a phone call about something else entirely, like it wasn't worth its own conversation. Oh, also, the opening, it's a tight list. You know how it is. And then he'd moved on. I hadn't said anything back. I never did. My brother's name is Wyatt. He's 38, 4 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the sun that the rest of my family orbits. Everything he does is interesting. Every idea he has is worth funding. When he dropped out of college to start a food truck, my parents refinanced a portion of their home equity line to help him. When the food truck failed, they said it was the economy. When his catering company folded, they said it was bad luck. And when he came to Thanksgiving 2 years ago announcing he was going to open a full-service restaurant in Las Vegas, my mother actually cried happy tears at the table. I'm a contract attorney. I'd been one for 7 years. I review agreements for a living. I read the fine print that no one else wants to read, and I get paid reasonably well to do it. I have a retirement account and a savings account and a small but real investment portfolio. I have a studio apartment that is entirely mine and a cat named Biscuit who requires nothing from me except food and the occasional acknowledgement of his existence. My family finds me boring. I know this because my mother said it once, not quite to my face, but close enough. You're so cautious, sweetheart. Wyatt takes risks. That's why he'll go far. I thought about that on Thursday night as I watched his Instagram stories. The restaurant looked beautiful. I'll give him that. He has an eye for things. He always did. I turned off my phone around 10 and went to bed early. I had a contract review due in the morning. I didn't hear the calls until 2047 a.m. I woke up thinking something was physically wrong. That specific animal panic of being jolted out of deep sleep, heart hammering, mouth dry, reaching for the phone with the irrational certainty that someone had died. The screen was white with notifications, 31 missed calls, 17 text messages, 4 voicemails. The breakdown made my stomach drop. My mother, 11 calls. Wyatt, 9 calls. My father, 7 calls. 2 calls from a number I didn't recognize with a Las Vegas area code. The texts were worse. They came in waves, starting at midnight and escalating. Hey, call us when you get this. Then, it's important. Then, seriously, pick up. Then, from Wyatt, you need to call me back right now, this isn't a joke. Then from my mother, in all caps, which she never does, someone please pick up the phone. My name is Simone. I'm 34 years old. I own a KitchenAid mixer I've used twice, and until 2047 on a Friday morning in late October, I thought the worst thing my family had ever done to me was not invite me to a restaurant opening. I called my father back first because he is the least volatile of the 3 of them. He answered before the first ring finished. Simone. His voice was strange, flat and airless, like he'd been punched and hadn't fully exhaled yet. Where have you been? Asleep, Dad. It's 3 a.m. What's happening? There was a long pause. I heard noise behind him, voices, the clink of something metal, a distant sound that might have been crying. The opening didn't go well, he said finally. What does that mean? Is everyone okay? Is someone hurt? Nobody's hurt. It's a financial thing. My attorney brain woke up before the rest of me did. What kind of financial thing? Another pause. The investor pulled out. What investor? The one backing the restaurant. He came tonight, saw the numbers, and walked. said he wasn't confident in the projections. And now, Wyatt owes the suppliers, the kitchen equipment, the interior contractor. They all need payment by end of next week or they're filing liens. How much? My father's exhale was long and shaky. $43,000. I sat up fully. My feet hit the cold tile floor. I looked at Biscuit, who was sitting at the foot of the bed watching me with the placid indifference of a creature who has never had a mortgage. Dad, I said carefully, that's a business problem. He needs to call the suppliers, negotiate payment terms, contact a business attorney. We already talked to someone. There isn't time. These guys, the contractor especially, he's threatening to go to the Vendors Association and have Wyatt blacklisted. He'd never work in this industry again. Okay, but that's still Simone. And here it came. I could feel it before he said it, the way you can feel a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. We need you to co-sign an emergency bridge loan, $43,000, just to cover the suppliers. Wyatt has a second investor meeting next month, and when that comes through, no. I said it before he finished the sentence. I didn't say it meanly. I just said it the way I'd say no to a contract clause that exposes my client to unlimited liability, clearly, immediately, without drama. Simone, I'm not co-signing a loan for a business I have no ownership stake in. That's not something I'm willing to do. I'm sorry the opening went badly. I genuinely am. But this isn't, you have the best credit score in this family. His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I felt it, the old guilt, the one that lives somewhere behind my sternum. You've always been so careful. Your mother and I, we've used everything we had. If there was another way, put Wyatt on, I said. There was shuffling, a muffled exchange I couldn't decipher. Then my brother's voice, and the shock of it was that he sounded sober and calm. Wyatt is usually theatrical. He does everything at full volume, but this was a different register entirely. Hey, he said, hey, tell me what happened. He did, and I'll give him credit, he was honest. The investor had seen the books at the opening and found 3 months of projections that Wyatt admitted were, and I'm quoting him here, optimistic. The kitchen equipment lease had a balloon payment clause that was due before revenue could reasonably cover it. The contractor had not been paid the final 30% of his invoice. 2 vendors were owed net 15 balances from the opening night supplies. It was a mess, but it was a survivable mess. With the right attorney and some negotiated extensions, he could probably manage it without a bridge loan at all. I told him this. I walked him through it step by step, the way I'd walk a client through a bad contract. I was not unkind. I was not triumphant. I was trying to be useful. He was quiet for a moment when I finished. I appreciate that, he said, but the contractor won't negotiate. He's already threatened to file. Let him file. An attorney can. Simone. And now the tone changed. Just slightly. A small shift like a key change in music. You know I wouldn't ask if there was another way. You know that, right? Wyatt. You've never had to ask anyone for anything. You have your degree, your job, your little apartment. You're fine. You've always been fine. You've never had to take a risk in your life. He paused. We're family. This is what family does. There it was. The card. It arrives at different times in different arguments, but it always arrives. I'm not co-signing, I said again. I'm sorry. My mother got back on the phone. I don't know how she took it from Wyatt, but suddenly she was there, and she was crying, and she said my name 4 times in a row in that particular way she has that is designed, I think without full conscious awareness, to make me feel like I was born wrong. I said I was sorry. I said I loved her. I said goodnight. I hung up and sat in the dark for a while. Then I opened my laptop, because something Wyatt had said was sitting wrong. The balloon payment clause. I know how to read a lease. I've read hundreds of them. And there was something specific about the way he'd said it. Not there was a balloon payment clause, but the balloon payment clause was due. Like he already knew exactly when it was due. Like he'd known for a while. I pulled up my credit monitoring account. I hadn't checked it in 6 weeks. I use a service that flags any new inquiries or accounts, and I had it set to email me, but I'd been filtering those emails into a subfolder I don't always read. I sorted by date. The blood drained out of my face so completely that I actually put my hand flat on the desk to steady myself. 41 days ago, there had been a hard inquiry on my credit from a commercial lending company based in Nevada. 38 days ago, a business loan account had been opened, not in Wyatt's name, not in my parents' names, in mine. Simone A. Delacroix. That's me. The account balance was $31,000. The lending company was listed as Meridian Capital Partners, Las Vegas, Nevada. I clicked through to the inquiry details with the specific, terrible focus of someone who has just seen something they cannot unsee. The application had been filed from an IP address I didn't recognize. The employment information listed was my actual employer, my actual salary within $500 of accurate, my social security number, my home address. I sat very still. I opened a new window and searched for the Meridian Capital Partners application portal. Their website had a document upload section for existing borrowers. I put in my social and the loan number. The original application loaded. There was a signature on page 4. It was my name written in handwriting that was almost mine. The loops were a little too careful, the A a little too round, the way handwriting looks when someone is copying it slowly and deliberately rather than signing naturally. But it would pass. It had passed. I stared at that signature for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my brother back. He answered on the second ring, and before he could say anything I said, "Wyatt, did you open a business loan in my name?" Silence. The particular quality of silence that is not absence of noise, but absence of response. In 7 years of contract law, I have heard that silence across many negotiating tables. It always means the same thing. Wyatt, we were going to tell you. His voice was different again, not calm anymore, something thin and pressurized underneath it. After the opening, when the investor confirmed, we were going to pay it off before you even noticed. You never checked that account. You told me once you had it on autopilot. I had said that. Years ago. I had said it the way you say things to family without knowing they're filing it away. $31,000, I said. It was a bridge, just to cover until you forged my signature on a commercial lending application. I signed your name. That's different. It is not different, Wyatt. Legally, financially, criminally, it is not different. My voice was very even. I have trained it to be even when the rest of me is not. Does Mum know? A pause. Yes. Does Dad? Yes. All 3 of you. I said it not as a question. All 3 of you signed my name or watched someone sign my name to a $31,000 loan. And then tonight you called me 31 times to ask me to co-sign a $43,000 bridge loan on top of it. The co-sign would have helped consolidate. You were trying to get me to acknowledge the debt. I heard my own voice saying it and felt something cold and clarifying move. Through my chest. That was it. That was the mechanism. If I had co-signed tonight, I would have legally attached myself to both obligations. I would have been the one holding the bag. You needed me to put my name on new paperwork so the old paperwork looked like part of a pattern. Something I'd agreed to. More silence. You were going to let me co-sign without telling me there was already a loan in my name. We were going to tell you everything once the second investor came in. Stop talking, I said. And he did. I breathed. I looked at Biscuit, who had migrated to the top of the cat tree and was watching me with his usual expression of mild concern. I thought about the signature on page 4. I thought about the employment information they'd filled out, accurate to within $500, which means someone had looked at something. A pay stub. A tax document. Something in my parents' house that I had trusted them with over the years. I'm going to ask you one more question, I said, and I need you to answer it honestly because it is the last time I'm going to ask you anything. Okay, is there anything else in my name? Any other account, inquiry, application, anything? I want to know now before I find it myself. A very long pause, long enough that I knew the answer before he said it. There might be a credit card inquiry from August. But it didn't go through. They denied it. It shouldn't show up as it shows up, I said. It always shows up. I hung up. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that, because I think there's a version of this story where I sit there and cry and feel sad about my family and the relationship we could have had. I didn't. What I felt was something closer to a lock clicking open. The specific sensation of understanding a thing you have been almost understanding for a long time. I had been the responsible one since I was 16 years old, and my father's first business failed, and my mother sat at the kitchen table and said, "At least Simone won't give us trouble." I had taken that as a compliment. I had carried it like a compliment for 18 years. I had been careful and steady and self-sufficient, and I had lent money when asked and declined to make scenes at holidays and let the comparison to Wyatt wash over me without letting it stick. And they had looked at all of that, my caution, my credit score, my carefully maintained financial life, and seen not a person. They had seen a resource. I opened my laptop and I got to work. The fraud hotline for my bank was 24 hours. I called it at 3:22 in the morning and I spoke to a woman named, I remember this clearly, she had a kind, alert voice and she did not make me feel stupid. I explained everything methodically the way I would brief a client. Unauthorized inquiry in October. Loan account opened without my knowledge or consent. Forged signature on the application. I had the loan number, the lender name, the inquiry dates. She put a fraud alert on my account while we spoke and transferred me to the disputes team. I was on the phone for 2 hours and 19 minutes. While I was on hold between transfers, I emailed Meridian Capital Partners legal department. I found their general counsel's contact on the Nevada Secretary of State Business Registry with a formal written notification that the loan account was opened fraudulently, that I was filing a dispute, and that I would be contacting the Nevada Attorney General's office if the account was not frozen pending investigation. I CC'd my own work email to create a timestamp. When I got off the phone with the bank, I filed a report with the FTC's identity theft portal. It took 12 minutes, and I did it carefully, filling in every field completely. The FTC report generates an official record and is often required to dispute fraudulent accounts with lenders. Then, I locked my credit at all 3 bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, frozen. No new inquiries possible without a PIN that only I had. By the time I finished, it was 5:41 in the morning. The sky outside my window was going from black to gray to the particular blue-gray that comes before actual light. Biscuit had relocated to my lap sometime during the second phone call and was asleep in the dense, committed way that cats sleep, which is to say completely, as if sleeping were a full-time occupation. My phone had been vibrating continuously. I had not looked at it. I looked at it now. My mother, 6 more calls, my father 4, Wyatt 2. My aunt, who lives in Tucson and whom I see once a year at Christmas, had texted me, "Simone, what on earth is going on? Your mother says you're being very difficult." There were 3 texts from cousins I barely know. One from my father's brother, who once asked me at Thanksgiving why I wasn't married yet, that Shane had been activated. The network of people who love my brother, or love my parents, or simply love the idea that family problems can be fixed by the most capable family member showing up and being reasonable. I read the texts one time through, not because I was going to respond, because I wanted to see it clearly. I wanted to see the whole shape of it before I did what I was about to do. Then I went through my contacts and I blocked every single person who had texted or called in the last 3 hours. My mother, my father, Wyatt, my aunt, the cousins, my father's brother, one by one. It took 4 minutes. I want to be clear that I did not do this in anger. By that point, I wasn't angry anymore. I was something past angry, in the place that comes after, which is calm and purposeful and a little bit sad in a way that doesn't require an audience. I went to the kitchen. I fed Biscuit, who woke up immediately at the sound of the can opening because some things are reliable. I made coffee. I stood at my kitchen window and watched the sky finish changing colors, and I drank the coffee while it was still too hot, the way I do when I'm trying to feel something concrete and real. Somewhere in Las Vegas, my brother was probably sitting in his beautiful restaurant with its copper pendant lights in its backlit bar, looking at the wreckage of the evening and figuring out how to frame it as someone else's fault. My mother was probably calling relatives. My father was probably sitting quietly and going along with all of it, the way he always has. They thought I would fold. I understand why they thought that. I had been folding in small ways for 18 years, lending money I didn't ask to have returned, absorbing comparisons without comment, being the one who drove to Phoenix Sky Harbor at midnight when my brother missed his flight because he called me and I went, being available, being reasonable, being the one who wouldn't give them trouble. They had looked at all of that and made a calculation, and the calculation was wrong. I was not going to lose my credit score, my professional license, my carefully constructed financial life to cover for people who had signed my name to a loan without asking me and then called me 31 times in the middle of the night and asked me to make it worse. 6 months later, the Meridian Capital loan was discharged from my credit report entirely. The fraud dispute went in my favor, which it was always going to, because I had documentation and a timestamp and a signed application with handwriting that didn't match any sample of mine on file. Wyatt settled with the contractor. He negotiated, which was, I'll note, what I told him to do at 3 in the morning before I knew about the loan. The restaurant is still open, last I heard. I don't follow his Instagram anymore. My parents have emailed me twice. Not called, emailed, which tells me something about how the calculation shifted once the blocking happened. The first email said they were sorry things had gotten so complicated. The second one, 3 months later, said that family is forever and they hoped I would come around. I read both emails once and did not respond to either. My aunt sent me a Christmas card with a note inside that said she didn't know the full story, but that she hoped I was okay. I thought that was kind. I wrote her back. I still have the coffee mug I was holding when I watched the sky turn light that morning. It's nothing special, a plain white one from a hotel I stayed at for a work conference, which I know is stealing, but it was 3:50 in the morning and I needed caffeine and the mug was just sitting there. I use it every day. There are mornings when I stand at my kitchen window with that mug and think about what I lost. Not the money. The money was never really at risk because I moved fast and I knew what I was doing. But the other thing, the idea that the people who raised me were, at minimum, not willing to commit fraud in my name. That idea is gone and I don't get it back. But there are also mornings, most mornings actually, when I stand at that window and feel something that took me a while to name. It isn't happiness exactly, although I am generally happy. It's more like the sensation of a room after all the furniture has been rearranged and you finally have space to move around. I live alone. I have a cat, a retirement account, and a coffee mug I technically stole from a Marriott in Denver. I go to bed when I want and wake up when my alarm says to, and nobody calls me at 3 in the morning anymore. It is a very quiet life. I worked very hard for it. I've thought a lot about the word reliable, how it sounds like a compliment, how it gets used like one, and how for most of my adult life, I let it function as a leash. Being reliable meant I showed up. It meant I lent money without making it awkward. It meant I drove to the airport at midnight and didn't complain about it later. It meant I absorbed the comparisons to Wyatt, his boldness, his vision, his willingness to risk, without pointing out that someone had to be steady so the rest of them could afford to be reckless. I thought I was choosing that role. Looking back, I think it was chosen for me early, and I just never questioned the choosing. What I know now is this. The people who called me 31 times that night were not calling because they trusted me. They were calling because they had already used me, used my name, my credit history, my carefully maintained financial life, and now they needed me to finish the job by not noticing. There was a version of that night where I don't open my laptop, where I just co-signed the bridge loan because my father's voice cracked and my mother said my name 4 times, and the guilt did what guilt is designed to do. That version of me would have spent the next 2 years untangling a debt that was never hers, explaining a loan she never agreed to, and defending a credit score that took a decade to build. I didn't become a contract attorney by accident. I became one because I learned young that the world runs on agreements and that the most dangerous agreements are the ones no one writes down. The unspoken agreement in my family was that I would always be available, that my stability was a shared resource, that my no was a starting point for negotiation rather than an answer. What Wyatt did, what all 3 of them did, was the logical conclusion of that agreement. They didn't forge my signature because they were evil. They did it because, in their minds, they had already been borrowing from me for years. The loan was just the first time they made it official without asking. That's the thing about letting people treat you as a resource for long enough. Eventually, they stopped seeing the line between what you've given and what you haven't yet. The fraud dispute went in my favor. Of course it did. I had documentation, timestamps, a signed application with handwriting that didn't match mine on file anywhere. The loan was discharged. My credit was restored. The practical consequences for me were manageable because I moved fast and I knew exactly what I was doing. But the real consequence, the one that doesn't show up on a credit report, was clarity. I had spent 18 years making myself smaller so that my family could feel bigger. I had called that love. It wasn't love. It was a habit that everyone around me had learned to depend on, and when I stopped, they called it cruelty. Simone setting a boundary was a betrayal. Simone protecting herself was a monster. That's what the text said. That's what my aunt's note implied. But here is what I've come to understand. Standing at my kitchen window with a stolen hotel mug and a cat who requires nothing from me except to be fed on time, the people who call your self-protection selfish are usually the ones who were profiting from you not having any. You cannot reason your way into being respected by people who benefit from not respecting you. You cannot be responsible enough, or patient enough, or generous enough to earn it from them. The only thing that changes the equation is the willingness to stop participating in it. Fully, without negotiation, without leaving a door open that they will walk back through the moment their next crisis requires a reliable person. I blocked 31 contacts in 4 minutes. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. I fed Biscuit. And I have been, since that morning, unreachable in exactly the way I should have been all along.